Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jerry Chenyavsky, and I'm chair of the British Curriculum Forum. And I'd really like to welcome you all to an event that focuses our attention on how we can build a curriculum for a sustainable future. If there's something positive that we can salvage from the effects of this dreadful pandemic, I think for me, it's been the time it's given so many of us the opportunity to re-examine the world that we live in and our relationship to it. With plastic, food, water wastage on the one hand, and poverty, global warming, and disease on the other, the pandemic has given us all plenty of food for thought on how we can balance our material needs while respecting the needs of our planet. But it's a balance we must achieve, and quickly, with the rise in global temperatures and the warming of our oceans, the shrinking of our ice sheets and the raising of our sea levels, and with escalating carbon emissions accompanying the acidification of our oceans, it's no great surprise that we are also witnessing more regular and extreme weather events. These factors impact on our wildlife, with the Worldwide Fund for Nature and the Zoological Society's Living Planet report highlighting a 60% drop over the last 40 years in our mammal, fish, bird, and reptile populations. A situation surely not helped by the shrinking of our tropical rainforests, 120,000 square kilometers in just 1 year, or put another way, 30 football pitches per minute. Recent protests by Extinction Rebellion, the worldwide Fridays for Future strikes by young people, and the UN Climate Summit are just some of the many indicators of a growth in global awareness and concern about the climate crisis. The UN's 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development has presented a unique opportunity to reorientate efforts towards a new path for development with sustainability at its core. Its goal 4, to ensure inclusive and equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities, is a goal central to this and to the achievement of all 17 Sustainable Development Goals. But education cuts across the entire SDG agenda. Education for sustainable development enables the possibility for every human being to acquire the knowledge, the skills, attitudes, and values necessary to shape a sustainable future. Schools strongly value preparing young people for that future, but say that they need more help embedding sustainability. Writing for the Bera blog, Joshua Jadoin points out that education for sustainable development offers students opportunities not just to learn about social, economic, and environmental issues, but crucially, to become change makers in their lives and the lives of others. With that point in mind, we're delighted to announce that following a highly competitive process, BERA will be supporting a new research commission that aims to create a teacher and youth co-created manifesto for education for environmental sustainability from the 4 jurisdictions of the UK. Led by Dr. Linda Dunlop at the University of York and Dr. Elizabeth Rushton at King's College London, this commission will design 5 participative and inclusive online workshops involving at least over 116 to 18-year-olds and 30 teachers drawn from across the 4 nations. These workshops will create opportunities to share experiences of and visions for education for environmental sustainability, and will be analysed to generate a manifesto, the first of its kind in the UK, something that we hope can influence policy and practice. Today's British Curriculum Forum event brings together educators from schools, colleges, and universities from across the UK with a passion for curriculum and sustainable development. In different ways, our guest speakers examine what we mean by sustainability, its relationship to the curriculum, and how, through research, discussion, and debate, we can better understand the ways in which the curriculum can transform the lives of young people. But when it comes to sustainability, this is not something that we can do on our own. It demands collaboration on all fronts, collaboration with our politicians and policymakers, collaboration with our subject associations, our examination bodies, our NGOs and charities, and collaboration with our teaching and student unions, and indeed all of us involved in teacher education in all its guises and locations. Our guest speakers today include Richard Greenwood, Jackie Eyre, Amy Malvena, Raoul Caravadra, and Eleanor Langthorne. Richard Greenwood has been a senior lecturer in primary teacher education at the Stranmillis University College, Belfast for 30 years. His specialist areas are geography in the primary school, outdoor learning, and primary school cross-curricular approaches. And he's also published a number of research papers and book chapters in these and related areas. Jackie Eyre has more than 30 years experience as a secondary school teacher and faculty lead for citizenship and PSHE in the northwest of England. She has taught an extensive range of subjects, including citizenship, PSHE, geography, history, RE, and sociology. And she's worked at the Liverpool World Centre since 2018, working on projects around the Sustainable Development Goals. And she's also worked as a local advisor on the British Council Connecting Classrooms Through Global Learning programme. Amy Malvena works at Charles Dickens Primary School. She's a teacher and researcher invested in arts-based creative approaches to mapping praxis and participatory research with children and young people. Amy is also co-creator and content coordinator at London South Art Hub, a free online learning research resource for educators, children and young people, which aims to widen access to quality art education for all. Raul Caravadra is an engagement manager at LUTFA, the immersive and interactive EdTech platform that allows pupils to build connections with new people, places and cultures and brings powerful human stories from across the globe into the classroom. In the wake of the Birmingham Trojan Horse affair, Raul helped establish the Birmingham Education Partnership, a school-led system for school improvement. And he works with senior and executive leaders across the country to improve the quality of teaching and leadership and to close the disadvantage gap. And finally, Eleanor Langthorne is a senior lecturer in teacher education at the University of Worcester. She has a background in teaching secondary geography and science, as well as leading the Eco School and Global Learning Programme. She now leads secondary geography and sustainability in the School of Education and sits on the Sustainability and Responsible Futures Committee. She's worked on a variety of sustainable development projects, including working with the Environmental Agency and the Met Office, and her current Green Impact project centres on collaborations for teacher education in climate crisis. We encourage as many of you as possible to pose questions today to these fabulous guest speakers. And please tweet about this at hashtag BERA_sustainability. That's sustainability with a capital S. I'll say that again. Hashtag BERA_sustainability. The more tweeting, the better on this very, very important issue. You're going to see me at various stages over the next couple of hours, but on behalf of the BCF steering group, I now invite you to sit back and enjoy these thought-provoking presentations. And I also hope that in the not too distant future, we will see you in person at the next BCF event, as and when things get back to a better than normal. Our first speaker today is Dr. Richard Greenwood from Stranmillis University College in Belfast. It might take a minute or so as we make that transition from me to Richard, but Richard, it is over to you right now.
Thank you very much, Jerry. I've never been called fabulous before, but it's really nice to be speaking to everybody today from Belfast. My university college is Stranmillis in Belfast. We are largely a teacher education institution, but not exclusively. We've got around 100 primary BEd students, and that's who I spend most of my time working with. And my title today is What If? Some upper primary pupils' reactions to the hypothetical destruction of some local woodland. And as part of the course that they do, a 4-year BEd, they choose a specialism in first year, and the ones who choose history and geography all come to me and my history colleague, and in first year it's over to me and I do a project on outdoor learning with them. And as part of that, we make a link with the local primary school, and they're just down the road from us, and I call it Autumn to Winter on the Stranmillis campus. And you know where Belfast is, if you can see it behind the list of names there, and this is our Stranmillis campus from above, and it's got a lot of green area, a lot of trees and so on, as well as all of the buildings. There it is. And the old building, 1930, and an even older building, 1856, right in the middle. It isn't always that sunny in Belfast, but it certainly was when I took that photograph. And some modern buildings as well, but lots of green space and lovely trees, including this beautiful old Spanish chestnut, must be 140 years old, I would say. And plenty of wildlife as well. We see plenty of squirrels and magpies, maybe not quite so frequently the other bits of wildlife there. And here are some of my first year specialism students a number of years ago preparing to go on an autumn walk in preparation for inviting the local primary 5 pupils, that's year 4 in England, 8 to 9 year olds, up onto our campus for an autumn walk groups of pupils, groups of students going around the campus, picking up leaves, just enjoying being outside in the autumn. And then we go back and having taken photographs to their school and making nice displays and doing some creative work with photographs and leaf rubbings and poetry and all sorts of nice things. And then we do the same thing again in the winter. Same students, same pupils, same route, looking at photographs taken in the autumn and just enjoying seeing the difference between autumn and winter along the same route completely, and seeing how the season changes from autumn to winter. And as part of that winter one, we get them to make some little homes for an elf or a fairy, which they really enjoy doing and write about at length afterwards. I'm putting all of this in a kind of theoretical construct called place attachment, which is something from social psychology or environmental psychology. It's a very interesting idea, and there's plenty of reading matter there on this PowerPoint if you want to go back in and look a little bit more at all of this. One of those references was by a colleague of mine called Julia Tanner, writing in the Little Primary Geography Geographical Association magazine in 2009 called Special Places, about place attachment and children. And she talked to hundreds of teachers down through the years as a consultant, asking them as part of their workshop to nominate a special place. And you can be thinking about a special place in your life as you listen to me for the next few minutes. And she said this: we have feelings about places, and some places have particular personal significance and meaning for us. And these emotional bonds are referred to as place attachment by environmental psychologists. And in all those hundreds of teachers, she summarized all the main reasons they gave for nominating those places as being along these lines. They had memories of having had a good time there. They had associations with significant loved people there. And the places themselves often had intrinsic positive qualities. They were beautiful places. And in the flyer for this event today, one of the sentences jumped out at me. It was a question: can the curriculum we build together in the classrooms of today offer hope for the world of tomorrow? And my straight answer to that is yes. And my real argument today is let's do more of the local. We've all been spending more time locally in the last year, but let's do more local in our primary curriculum. Why? Because place attachments are often laid down in childhood. And your memories as adults of childhood are often including lots of instances of being in the outdoors, as opposed to maybe being in your classroom in school or in your own home. Outdoors, very affecting. And Tanner went on to say this: how can teachers promote children's secure attachment to place and deepen their understanding of our affective response to places? Well, one of her arguments was it needs to start from their own little geographies, their ethnogeography, as somebody who I hope is part of this event today, Fran Martin, coined back in the 2000s, and also Professor Simon Catling as well. And we need to move from the bubble wrap generation and the nature deficit disorder generation to those kids on the right who are enjoying being in nature. But can we do it in the local? Can we do it as part of the primary school curriculum? She also said something in that same little article which really piqued my interest. She talked about place loss. And sometimes the value of a place is revealed most clearly to us when the settings we hold most dear are threatened or lost. So I thought to myself, can I work with the pupils who were up on the autumn walk and the winter walk and do a little thinking skills what if exercise with them? I wonder what their reaction would be. So I went and arranged it with the teacher, went down to their classroom, just me, not the students. And I said to them, here are lots of photographs of you on the Stranmillis campus enjoying what you were seeing on those two walks. I wonder what you would think if you heard on the radio or on the TV, the local broadcast, that the whole grounds had been sold and the students would go eventually, and so would the lecturers like me, and those buildings and so on would be bulldozed, and the trees would all be chopped down, and it would all be turned into these lovely upmarket houses in South Belfast. I'm sure lots of property developers would just love to get their hands on our 46 hectares, I think it is, to build nice, expensive houses. And I wrote this all up in the Little Primary Geography magazine in 2017, if anybody is interested. And I produced this kind of colored Carroll diagram, asking them to think about the pros and the cons, the advantages and disadvantages of keeping the campus, and on the other hand, of knocking it all down and building houses. And they took part really enthusiastically and chatted away, and there was lots of good conversation going on. This little auburn-haired girl on the left was getting a bit worried at one point, and she said to me, I can't think of any reasons why anybody would want to cut down all the trees, and what's going to happen to all the squirrels. So she was struggling with the whole idea of doing away with the campus as it stands. So I summarized some of their ideas on the screen, and it didn't take long for them to work out that the diagonally opposite boxes are the same, except the opposite from each other. Animals keep their homes as opposed to animals lose their homes, as pros and cons. And in the house building side of things, well, houses are built and people need houses. House builders need jobs. And I said to them, you might have money, your family might have money, but what's the big E word for the whole of Northern Ireland when we talk about money? And one of the 9-year-olds said economy. I was very impressed. I went back a week later and they'd done some follow-up work, and they'd continued on my big A3 sheets of paper and colored them in and so on, good stuff, because I'd set them some tasks and said to the teacher and said to the class, can you get into some groups? Either you're for the campus remaining or you're for the houses being built. And maybe you can draw some pictures, write a short piece, do some poetry, write a poster, create a poster, etc. And they did, and they had great fun. Here's one of the groups with some of their lovely work and the creations that they produced, and Save Our Campus, and lots of pictures of badgers and squirrels and foxes. Look at that lovely one. They really enjoyed themselves. The campus should remain. A bit of argument going on there, and some lovely poetry, short and sweet. I didn't use the word destruction at all. I was trying to be very unbiased in my presentation to them, but they certainly used the word destruction quite a lot. And look at this one, once beauty roamed this place, and destruction used at the end there as well. So quite strong feelings. But there was one group who said, no, we need more homes. Houses should be built. So that's the kind of thing that they wrote. And I took a nice photograph of all of them at the end and said to them in front of everybody, why did you choose to be in that group? I'm not sure if the teacher had a hand in any of this, but the boy at the back of the glasses, he said, well, I knew everybody else was going to write about trees and foxes, so I decided to do this one instead. And the little girl holding the poster said, I just like drawing houses. So it wasn't an anti-environmental stance that they were producing. But Tanner, back to her argument again, said this, there's a growing body of evidence that secure place attachment is important for emotional well-being, and schools are well placed to foster this through stimulating and appropriate curricular experiences. So what might those stimulating and appropriate curricular experiences be? Well, I'm just putting a call out for maximizing the local, doing more local studies in the primary school. Can we find old and current photographs and compare them, spot the difference? Can we find current Google Earth views of our town, our village, our part of the city compared to old maps? Can we look at current artists' interpretations of our area? Can we get outside? I'm a primary geographer. I want to get the kids outside doing surveys and litter picks and visiting places of local geographical and historical interest of all kinds, maybe including environmental things and forest school events, etc., etc. Just to finish, the last couple of things to say, our inspectorate in Northern Ireland, the equivalent of your Ofsted, are very much for this, and they're saying schools can improve their provision further by making more use of learning resources in their own locality. And they give lots of examples. And they were critical, saying a significant minority of the schools visited did not exploit fully the rich possibilities of studies on the doorstep, and provided topics which were sometimes disconnected from the children's interests, and where there's a lack of local links and little or no use made of the school, local or wider environment, and insufficient development of outdoor learning, the programs for learning risk losing relevance for the children. And as a primary geographer, I'm very for lots of lovely projects on tropical rainforests and volcanoes, but if that's at the expense of local work, local studies, then I'm not for it at all. And just to finish, no better man, Sir David Attenborough said this, there is constant pleasure to be had in the natural world. The more you learn about it, the more pleasure you get from it. No one will protect what they don't care about, and no one will care about what they have never experienced. So let's help our pupils in our primary schools to experience the local more. And that's me finished.
Hi there, just getting used to the turning on my camera and turning on my microphone. Richard, thank you very, very much indeed. It's over to questions now. We've had the question from Roxana, and in that question, she says that Whoops, hang on. I've got lots of busy stuff happening on my screen. Let's just lose that. Brilliant. Roxana's question is, Italy is the first country to incorporate climate change and sustainable development into its national curriculum. How can we follow Italy's footsteps? That question is to you, Richard.
Oh my, that's a broad one. Not specifically about my particular, but I agree completely. I think there are lots of ways in which primary schools can begin to mention these rather difficult things. They're all phrases, global warming, climate change, and so on, that primary school pupils may have heard about before. So it's a case of trying to find ways in via subjects like science and like geography, and trying to keep things age appropriate for the level of the children that are there. But finding local solutions to global problems would be one thing that I would very strongly try and recommend. But if there are local experts, people who have written things and produced videos and so on that are within reach of the primary school that could be brought in to talk to the children, that might take the pressure off pupils a little. But there are all sorts of other organizations, such as the one that I mentioned earlier, the Geographical Association, who might be able to help with things like this. And I'm sure there are other people on this event who might be able to answer that question more fully than me.
Thank you. I'm encouraging as many people to ask questions. Follow on from Roxana's lovely example there. A question from me, Richard, if that's all right. I mean, what do you think are the biggest challenges facing schools in embracing the sustainability agenda? There are many, but I wonder which ones that you can see as the most challenging.
I think one for teachers is lack of confidence in their own knowledge and their own understanding, and therefore it is up to teachers and it is up to organizations to try and provide as much age-appropriate information to help teachers, because I think that's one of the difficulties. Going outside, talking about the environment, just I don't know the names of those trees is enough for some teachers to not want to bother leaving the comfort of their own classrooms. But I think it is up to every teacher to try to bring in knowledge in this way to the pupils, and skills as well, to try and help them to understand that they are the future. But even if it's something as easy as understanding litter and recycling and litter in the local area. I've been going on a lot of walks in my local area over the last year, as everybody can imagine, and I've started to get a litter picker and pick up things and put them in a bin bag, and it just depresses me that so many of them are Red Bull cans, and I know other energy drinks are available. But I think those are young people's drinks, and they're not long out of school, and they're still throwing away cans, and it's just very depressing, I must say. So start local, start immediate, but try and find as many sources of good information as you possibly can to give you the confidence as a teacher to try and drive this forward.
Following on from that, you won't be surprised that I'm asking something about teacher education. I mean, the challenges that teacher educators, whether or not they're located in schools or in colleges or indeed in universities, to try and deliver everything that they're trying to do within what some might argue is the crazy short period of time that we have to train and educate a future teaching workforce. I mean, what would you like to see, nevertheless, teacher educators doing with this issue?
Well, I'm very lucky. As I said in my presentation, we have a 4-year BEd degree, but I realize that that's not the case everywhere across the UK, and there are Teach Direct courses, and there's sometimes very little time. And one of those people that I mentioned in my presentation, Professor Simon Catling's done an awful lot of work on this, and really the amount of time that, for example, geography is given within teacher education has greatly diminished over the last decades and so on. So it's very difficult, and I understand that challenge is there. So there may have to be lots more in-service help for teachers, rather than it all being packed into sometimes very short time spans of teacher education programs. But again, money is the object of all of this, and those kind of programs when teachers are in schools are really not available to the extent that they were when I was a teacher trainee, etc., etc. But I don't have an answer to that problem, and maybe again somebody on the call might be much more qualified to speak about this than me.
Richard, thank you very much. What you have to do now, Richard, is just imagine over 160 people giving you a big round of applause, because they are definitely out there. But thank you very, very much indeed. We're going to move to our next speaker. Just before I do move to that sort of that introduction, really just to encourage everybody who's with us today to ask as many questions as possible. We've got the possibility to sort of field those questions, so just feel free to tap in those questions. Our next speaker is Jackie Eyre. Jackie's had more than 30 years experience as a secondary school teacher, as I said in the overall introduction, faculty lead for citizenship and PSHE. She's taught an extensive range of subjects, amazing range of subjects, citizenship, PSHE. PSHE I'm extremely excited about, because my wife is deputy CEO of the PSHE Association, Jackie, so we can have a conversation about that after this event. Geography, history, RE and sociology. And she's worked at the Liverpool World Centre since 2018. Jackie, I think I've already given you a lovely big up. I'm going to hand everything over to you right now.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much. And I'm very, very grateful to have this opportunity this afternoon to share with you all this really exciting project that I have just finished working on, an EU project with the Sustainable Development Goals at the heart of it. So I work, let's click it on. I work at the Liverpool, apologies, this is moving on a little bit quick. I work at the Liverpool World Centre. It's a development education centre, and it's part of a national network of development centres around the country, some of which you may have all worked with in the jobs that you do. And we work with local universities. We also are in charge of the TEASNet organisation, and we regularly host that conference in Liverpool that some of you might have attended. So I'm here today to talk to you really, sorry, it's jumping ahead, to share key elements of a curriculum-based project called Get Up and Goals that had the Sustainable Development Goals at the heart of it. And that fits in really well with what we're talking about this afternoon. And I'm really looking at it in terms of how it helped build teacher capacity and confidence in delivering lessons on sustainability. So moving on. Right. We are at a moment of real sort of significant change, I think, both obviously in the world and the UK because of the pandemic, but also we need to take this opportunity to really rethink education and think about what do we want for our young children to be doing in school, and what kind of young citizens do we want them to be when they leave school. So the context for my presentation this afternoon is there are lots of organisations also talking about the future direction of education. So some of these you might have heard about, and it might be useful for you or interesting for you to follow up these conversations. So one is an organisation called Reboot the Future. They have recently produced quite an interesting video, which is all about aiming to get parents thinking about what kind of learning do they want for their young children, particularly because they've been involved in home learning. It's a really good opportunity to get them to think about that issue. And then moving on to other organisations, some of you might have heard of this one, SOS, Students Organising for Solidarity. They are really campaigning very hard at the moment to get the climate emergency onto school curriculums. And that's in subjects, not just history, science or geography, they really want to embed it across the curriculum. So into the cultural things like drama and dance, art, into English, right across. Now they are a research-led organisation, so they go out and talk to young people about the kind of curriculum that they would like to receive in school. And you can see some interesting statistics there. So 86% of young people said all schools and colleges should be doing more to help the environment, and 85% said children should be encouraged to do things themselves. And moving on, well, why do we need climate education? So another organisation that is really having quite a lot of success at the moment is Teach the Future. And Teach the Future is a youth-led campaign with young activists from the age of 13 up, who go out and do a lot of media work, but they are really trying to persuade the government that the climate emergency should be at the heart of the curriculum. And very lastly, in this little bit of my presentation, another important initiative is this Our Shared World. And this is a consortium of over 100 organisations. It's a network really trying to work towards this target of 4.7, which Jerry has already mentioned this afternoon. And that's an initiative that is open to any of you who might want to join and be part of that conversation, part of that pressure that is building. So if we move to my own project, before we move to my project, we're going to just do a quick survey just to see how you feel about some of these issues. So you've got 2 statements, and if you'd just like to, or 3 statements, if you'd just like to have a think, what do you feel? So yeah, that's pretty obvious this afternoon, I think, that there's going to be an overwhelming majority that the curriculum is not really equipping young people for what we want. Okay, so a bit of movement there. I'll give you the second statement. So we are more connected to each other and the planet as a result of the COVID pandemic. So maybe we're just a little bit more aware of the need for sustainability to be on the curriculum. Thank you very much. Allow a little bit more time for that to come in. So we have got some disagreement there, and obviously Richard was just talking there about the Red Bull can. There are lots of examples where we are perhaps being even more wasteful than ever and living in our own little bubbles and not thinking about other people. And then the last statement for you to consider is, and this is obviously at the heart of my passion this afternoon, is reimagining education is essential. We need to change the way we're doing things and get teachers thinking about things in a slightly different way. So moving on, going to share with you this exciting EU project. Okay, so my EU project, so I was very lucky to come out of teaching and get employed onto this project. It was a 3-year DEAR project. The website is there if you want to go and explore. All the resources attached to that project are completely free, so you can download them at this website. And it really had the SDGs at the heart of it, and 12 countries across Europe were involved, so it was very much a collaborative project aimed at Key Stage 3 of the school curriculum. So it's slightly unusual because it was a secondary school-based project. And, let's go back one. So we had a number of objectives, and you can read this PowerPoint at your own leisure later on because I'm going quite quickly this afternoon. But there were key themes that we were trying to work on. So one was very much awareness of the SDGs, trying to get teachers to have conversations about those in staff room and understand what they were, and also a little bit increase awareness of global citizenship education. And many teachers at the start of this project had never heard of the SDGs. And in fact, even today, teachers that I work with, many of them aren't really aware of the 17 goals. A second part of it was to develop resources that teachers could then use in their own classroom and to train them to feel that they were confident enough to perhaps talk about quite difficult issues sometimes that maybe they don't always feel that they want to broach with young people. So migration is obviously one that can be controversial, climate change, inequality, and gender equality. So those resources are all there. I decided very much to match them to PSHE and citizenship because that was my background, but also I felt that there was a little bit of capacity on the school curriculum for these lessons to go in at that point. We were very lucky to have funding for training, so we were able to build teacher confidence by inviting them to sessions to learn more about SDGs, to learn more about global citizenship education, and the kind of skills that we want young people to have, like critical thinking, problem solving, collaborative learning. There's also a geohistory textbook that I'm not going to talk about this afternoon, but you can go and download and explore. There was an awareness campaign from students, which I'll talk about in a moment. And there are some assessment tools to actually measure the impact of this, to see if the impact is working. Right, so we'll just go back. So I've mentioned some of these outputs. That's just a visual slide giving you an overview of what the project was all about. So if we start to think a little bit about one aspect. So what was meant to happen was that students would be really inspired and engaged by the lessons in school, and then they would develop their own pupil-initiated awareness campaigns that would go out into the school community and really sort of talk to parents, talk to other people about the SDGs and about some of these issues. Sadly, some of that was actually put on hold a little bit by the pandemic. But if you go to the website, our UK website, we've got some really interesting videos to inspire student action. And I'll talk about some of the challenges of that in a moment. So we were lucky we had funding because, as Richard talked about, I think before, teachers are not always confident to deal with some of these issues. So our funding enabled us to hold conferences and to hold training, really talking about the SDGs. And that's something that I think in the UK is lacking at the moment. Lots of training is very focused on sort of Ofsted criteria and Ofsted focuses, or exam specifications and target-driven aspects of school. So it was nice to be able to free teachers up. Another really exciting part of this project was the fact that we were working with 12 countries. So we had a lot of conversations online and face-to-face at the beginning of this, where we could learn from the experiences of other countries. And that's fascinating, just finding out where the SDGs are or global citizenship are in other countries. Some of them, in particular, Portugal and Ireland, are very much ahead of us. So Portugal, recent curriculum changes means that global learning is compulsory from the age of 5. And if you don't know very much about the citizenship programs in Southern Ireland, it's really worth exploring those because it's very much embedded right from the age of 5. Okay, and then moving on. Can I have the next slide, please? Thank you. So if we consider the outcomes of the project, so on this slide here, you can just see some of the statistics. So, you know, we reached 2,000 teachers. We had 10 schools testing our resources, 114 teachers delivering these lessons. And we measured that we impacted on 2,669 young people. So it was quite an ambitious study. We piloted the measuring and assessment tool in 5 schools, and we had 1,000 young people participating in these community awareness programs. However, the program wasn't without challenges. So if we have a little, well, we'll look at some of the key benefits and then we'll look at the challenges. So the next slide shows us some of the opportunities and benefits for schools. So first of all, bringing SDG themes into the fore in lots of areas of the curriculum, particularly PSHE, because that's part of my passion. But obviously it came in geography. We had different people picking it up. We had school chaplains picking it up as well in some of our pilot schools. And it really initiated conversations in schools about teaching for sustainability and how the global goals can really inspire young people. So it sort of got the whole thing sort of moving in these pilot schools. And teachers were learning through testing these TLUs, how young people were responding, and the sort of value of actually carrying out baseline and endline assessments. And then moving on, we had other benefits. So it was quite nice linking the curriculum element up to actually empowering students to have a voice. Having said that, there were some problems around that because sometimes whether that voice was an authentic student voice was difficult to measure, because teachers often need control of that kind of thing because of restrictions on timetables and, you know, lack of time at lunchtime. Moving on, we also had benefits to do with the training, which I've mentioned before, and the training really helped increase teachers' confidence and capacity. So if we move to look at the project challenges, I am going quite fast, so we've got 3 minutes left. So adaptability, so different school contexts, I tend to find that often Catholic schools will work with me because it fits in with their ethos, but I'm very keen to get it adaptable to all school contexts. And then the sustainability of the project. We had staff leaving. It's easier where you get leadership buy-in, but often that wasn't always the case. If you've got a teacher who perhaps was less experienced, it could be quite difficult. And we also, as I've mentioned already, the authenticity of whether the young person's voice was really coming through in the awareness campaigns. So to finish off, let's just have a little look at where to next. What I'm hoping the future or the legacy of this project will be. And I suppose part of that legacy is being invited to speak this afternoon. So I think that there is a need to change the curriculum. I think we do need to teach for sustainability, and I think that is a responsibility in all subjects, and I think it's perfectly possible in all subjects, and I think it can be done through cross-curricular links, but also within your own subject. I think we need to change the conversations teachers are having. I think we need to inspire and excite them, and I think we need to share ideas and teaching practices from other countries. And I think this is also happening. The vision is being transferred to young people. You could see that in the first part of my presentation with some of these groups organising. And lastly, change the narrative. We need to have new ideas and stories for the 21st century. And we need to change the teaching methodologies. So we need to actually have lessons that give skills for sustainable living to the next generation. And I do quite a lot of work. I'm a tutor at LJMU. I've done some recent work with my postgrads and my year twos. And I really like this statement that one of them said. And I think this is a good point to leave you all with. So if we just have a look at the next slide. So one of the questions from today's conference was, can the lessons we learn together in the present contribute to brighter days ahead? And I think one way of doing that is to inspire the next generation of teachers. So a really nice quote there as my final point. I can only hope, and this is from a teaching student, I can only hope that my lesson will inspire, motivate, and encourage pupils to become more responsible global citizens in the future, and that they will be equipped with the knowledge of how they, as an individual, can positively contribute to making the world and people's lives a better place. And I think that that's what we're all probably aiming to do as part of this discussion this afternoon. Thank you, Jerry.
Jackie, thank you very much indeed. Again, you just have to now imagine that there are just hundreds of people out there giving you an enthusiastic round of applause. But thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oh, I was just about to say we've had lots of questions, but the questions have all just vanished.
Oh.
I'm hoping, Dior, you can get them back on. Thank you very much. They've just reappeared. Also, just to say back to Richard, that Richard, you had lots of questions that came in at the end, but there was a delay. So we'll return back to those in the moment. Keep your questions coming in, folks. Can you also keep tweeting like you've never tweeted before? Because it would be great if we can get this out into the public domain. It's certainly a serious enough issue to warrant that. Jackie, lots of questions and lots of comments. I'll try and get through as many of them before we move on to our next speaker. Stephen Thompson starts, he says, I'm part of an ITT training group and we are cautious about the easy confusion between teaching, learning on the one hand and raising questions about activism on the other. Our concern is that it would be all too easy to politicize the classroom beyond the educational remit. Comments from you, Jackie, please.
Okay, so I'm going to start by putting it out there that I am also a trustee of Young Citizens. So that, if you know anything about that organisation, active citizenship is at the centre of that organisation. So I think as teachers, we're always going to inspire young people to take action. It's always happened, and sometimes that action can be very small things that they're doing in their school at lunchtime. I suppose more recently it's been the attending climate strikes, which I know some schools did feel uncomfortable with. And I think you have to navigate a way through that. You can't avoid encouraging pupils to think about these issues. And I think actually you want them to be doing things. So I don't see a problem with that, as long as you do it in a non-controversial, sensitive way.
Thank you. Fran Martin has just sort of commented and said, back to Stephen, saying education is already politicized through the decisions made about curriculum, through funding of projects to promote SDGs, etc.
You can't close pupils down, I don't think. They're entitled to have a voice. And if you look at Teach for the Future, the voice of some of those, and they're 13 up, they're amazing. We can't stop them from, well, in fact, they don't get listened to enough, young people.
Thank you. Stephen Martin asks, how will your EU project be evaluated? What criteria will you use to assess impacts? Impacts, that word that sends shivers down most of us who work in university. Thank you for that question.
Okay, so on this particular project, we were assessing impact. A colleague from Leeds developed a tool. I have to say, I don't think the tool worked very well, because it was very knowledge-based, and also developing tools that would work across 12 countries with 12 different educational sort of backgrounds and settings was very, very complicated. And also, how can you say just from some aspects of our project, we're having an impact when climate change is on the news, it comes up in other subjects. It was very difficult to isolate. But I think what we should be doing moving forward is assessing the values and finding out about the attitudes of young people before you deliver on a project, and then at the end of the project. And I think that's much more interesting, and that qualitative information from them is where I would head forward. But yes, we have got data and we have got information on that.
Fiona Groves asks a question very similar to a question I was going to ask had we not had any questions. So thank you very much, Fiona, for asking that. Fiona Groves from the Wildlife Trusts asks, how do we access in-service for teachers through the teacher training hubs?
Oh, I'm not quite sure if I understand that question. Do you want to rephrase that, Jerry? Are you thinking of a training from us as an organisation, or?
I'm not sure, to be honest, unless Fiona can quickly type in. It's just something that she said. But I'm assuming she means in-service training, which is how I read it. How do we access in-service training for teachers through teacher training hubs? I mean, that's the question she's asked.
We deliver lots of online training. I deliver the Global Teacher Award for the British Council through my work at LWC. We do bespoke CPD for teachers. We do teacher conferences, and we also work with pupils as well. So we're very flexible, and you just have to contact me. In terms of university courses, increasingly in Liverpool, we are getting involved in undergraduate courses and postgraduate courses, because we think that that's where the future is going to be, inspiring those young students.
Thank you very much. We've got more questions, so relatively brief answers, Jackie, so that I can try and get into them. But your answers are fabulous, so I don't want to stop you. Jen Bourne asks, which subject teachers did you target?
Okay, so for this particular project, I targeted PSHE and citizenship, because that was my last role in school, although I've got a humanities background. But I did have heads of geography coming on board. I had RE heads, and I had school chaplains. I'm also at the moment promoting some resources from Leeds DEC, and they've been developed for foreign languages, maths, science. They're all to do with climate change, and or what's the other one? RE and citizenship. And drama and English. Some of my lessons could go. There's a poetry lesson there that can go into English. So I think you can get these sorts of issues into every subject. And I could show people how to do that, but you definitely can. You can be quite creative with it, I think.
Got a comment from Dave Cudworth saying that I think that all universities have the potential to embed the SDGs into all university curriculums as well, too. He says, this will provide all students, whatever their degree, with sustainability awareness and understanding that they can take forward after they graduate into the work and beyond. I'm not going to ask you to comment on that because it's more of a comment, but I wanted to get that out there. Stephen Martin says the SDGs seek to take a holistic approach to our unsustainability, hence systems thinking and practice are a feature of their implementation. How are teachers approaching systems thinking and practice?
Oh, that's
discuss.
quite a complicated. Yeah, I think we could be here for quite a long time. I mean, I think that there are dangers with using the SDGs. In that, I think they can be taken too simplistically, and you know, they have got to be seen coherently and they've got to be grouped together. But I think that they do inspire conversations amongst young people, and I think what I've particularly liked is I tend to quite often encourage teachers. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, but I'm telling you sort of how I do it. I tend to say to teachers, take the themes of the global goals, and in particular, the idea of leaving no one behind, because I think that speaks to young people in the UK. I also try to get them to see that the global goals, unlike the Millennium Development Goals, are universal and they can start from the young person. And I suppose going back to Richard's point, it's about connecting with your own locality before you can sometimes go into the global issues. So I'm not quite sure I've answered, but that would be how I would perhaps approach it.
Thank you. I hope, Stephen, you're all right with that. Linda Dunlop says, what is needed to ensure more young people and teachers have access to these learning experiences around sustainability and linking the local to the global?
I think in terms of access, yeah, I mean, that project that I was talking about before, Our Shared World, there's lots of work. There's 5 working parties involved with that, which people are invited to go on. So I think that is partly trying to put pressure on government for curriculum changes. You've got other organisations. So I think the GUAG project was meant to talk to politicians. We were meant to try and get the SDGs onto national curriculums, particularly bearing in mind we have Brexit. I'll try not to be too political here. And we also had the pandemic. We very quickly, realistically realised that we probably weren't going to speak direct to, you know, the education minister or whatever. So a grassroots approach, which I suppose this conference this afternoon is demonstrating. You know, it's talking to colleagues and it's gradually working through that way. And we haven't got long. We need to be moving on it quite quickly. But we've got huge opportunity this year with COP26.
Fantastic, Jackie. Thank you very much. I'm going to read out the remaining the couple of 2 questions, but not for you to answer, but just because I'd like people to hear them. One is from Jen Bourne. I hope I've pronounced that right correctly, Jen. It says, was there a scoping exercise to see what other UK organisations were working in this space? Solutions for the Planet runs a sustainability-focused STEM and enterprise programme, the Big Ideas programme for 11 to 14-year-olds, 4,000 each year. And the website she's given is www.solutionsfortheplanet.co.uk. Would be great to connect. So I won't ask you to address that question, but I just wanted to give Jen that space. And Jonathan Gower has a question is, have you any school teachers using your geohistory textbooks? And then we've got a quick one in from Paul there. Did you allow or encourage a critical stance towards the SDGs on the project? And those questions are moving as I speak, and picking holes in something. If I can ask Paul, Jen and Jonathan to sort of just fire questions in a little bit sooner for the next speakers, if you fancy, and I'll try and address those earlier on if possible. But thank you very, very much indeed. I'm going to move us on. We are bang on time, which is just fantastic. And we're now going to Amy Malvena. Amy works at Charles Dickens Primary School. She's a teacher and researcher invested in arts-based creative approaches to mapping praxis and participatory research with children and young people. Amy is also co-creator and content coordinator of London's South Art Hub, a free online learning research resource for educators, children and young people, which aims to widen access to quality art education for all. Amy, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Jerry. So my talk today is it's conceptually framed by Donna Haraway's Compostist Multi-Species Feminism. And this was the driving force behind my own PhD project with children in Belfast in Northern Ireland around placemaking. But I want to talk today about how we can fruitfully apply and think about Haraway's concept of composting in the context of our primary school's curricular development. And I use Charles Dickens Primary School, Garden and Forest School as a case study where this is already happening really successfully. In conversation with my colleague, Daniela Jamois, I'm going to present some of the roots and shoots of our compostist approach to teaching and learning using this space. And in doing so, hopefully show how these composting matters come to matter in educating our children to build more livable futures. So underpinning the material metaphor of composting is Haraway's argument that nature's cultures, subjects and objects do not pre-exist their intertwined worldings. Indeed, children become with the actual worlds that they inhabit and inherit. Composting is also key to the Thulacene, which is Haraway's preferred conceptualization of our current era, the Anthropocene. The Thulacene requires sympoiesis, or making with, rather than autopoiesis, or self-making. And Haraway insists from a post-humanist perspective that the key to our earthly survival is a recognition that human lives are deeply knotted with and accountable to a multitude of more than human others in our everyday worlds. And what follows is her call for making kin, which takes place in lines of inventive connection, a practice of learning to live and die well with each other in a thick present. Now, Haraway's work has inspired a vast number of researchers and educators to take seriously the things and actions with which children encounter their common worlds. This common worlds approach, attributed to theorist Bruno Latour and well established now in fields of childhood studies, early childhood education, and environmental education beyond, mobilises much of Haraway's thinking about making kin. And I know primary geography champion Dr. Sharon Witt and her colleague Dr. Helen Clark from the University of Winchester here today are already doing so much of this already in their own work. The Common Worlds Research Collective celebrates relationality, intersectionality and difference, recognising sites when cross-species encounters occur as posing important questions about children, childhood, cohabitation and planetary futures. And I want to now give a flavour as to what this can look like in practice. Charles Dickens Primary School is a two-form entry school in the heart of Southwark in London. And we're very lucky to have on site a green space, which is a former wasteland between a road and the school that we've reclaimed and been using as a garden for over 10 years now. It's very recently been adapted into a forest school provision led by Daniela. I'm going to present a snapshot of a dialogue with Daniela to give you a flavour of the transformative power of this small green space with its chickens and worms and tomatoes and squirrels and wind and fire pits and more. We discuss the children's involvement with the School Food Matters project in partnership with two community markets, one very, very old, Borough Market, and one very new, Mercato Metropolitano at Elephant and Castle. And we then move on to talk about specific instances where by making kin in the garden nurtures careful and responsible relationships whereby children think with more than human others. Some smiley happy faces there. Hopefully this will work. This is myself and Daniela. Oh. Yeah, if you could start the video, please.
It's just the most incredible space in which the children to be thinking with the wind, to be thinking with the worms, with the chickens, with the bark, with the logs. It's completely enmeshed. You know, in the way you talk about it, if we think about the garden, the forest school is that compost heap again, their layering of their own experiences is preparing them to think about their futures, about their community, about these community links, about markets, about all sorts of things in a way where they have much more responsibility and a perception of themselves as being able to respond.
Absolutely. I mean, when we take part in the harvest sale at the market, it's just so special to be able to get the children to harvest the produce. It's not just about taking your produce there. Not anybody can sell at that market. They need to be bringing a story. So the provenance of your produce is really important.
Yeah.
And that's something that they really push at both Borough Market and at Mercato Metropolitano. Where is the food produced?
Mm-hmm.
How are the workers treated who produce that food? That's all part of the story.
Mm-hmm.
So the most powerful moment at the market sales has always been when the children tell the story of the food to the customers. So yes, they take on a massive responsibility.
The experiential element that they then it carries through, doesn't it, to all other areas of their learning where they feel that they can do. And I suppose when you look at the other aspects of the curriculum, the environmental sciences curriculum, the children already have such an anchor through that school space, through that one little green space that actually feeds up and infuses throughout their school journey.
It's really important. It's really important that they have that embedded in the curriculum.
Mm-hmm.
And then it makes sense to them because there are aspects of it that they have already experienced by having contact in the garden. And it's that layering of knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to also remember very deeply the things that they've done in a sensory way.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems that it's being committed to their long-term memory when it's something that they've smelled, when it's something that they have tasted. I have children in year 6 reminding me of the cherries that they tasted when they were in nursery.
Oh, wow.
Or, we have a child who once took the chicks home during the half term to look after them. And he is a child who needs to have time out of class every now and then.
Mm-hmm.
And he can take himself to the garden and be with those same chicks that are now adult chickens laying eggs and just be with them.
Yeah.
And that's very powerful for him. And like you say, it is a reason why he can be at school every day.
We think about, Donna Haraway's point about making kin. It's and in some ways more meaningful for him than many other relationships that he has in the course of that day.
There are some really special moments that there have been with individuals who found school very challenging. So we had a child one year who just became an expert bird watcher. Every day he would arrive at the school gates and tell us which bird he had spotted that weekend. And then he'd come and see which birds he could spot in the garden. And again, I think that really helped him make the transition from home to school every Monday.
Yeah.
I think that was really very difficult for him, but because of the interest we had in birds that matched his interest, and it was made that more meaningful by having a garden that had birds visiting it. We also have a duty to just cascade this knowledge, and that's why I'm so excited that David has embedded in our knowledge organisers some of the vocabulary and some of the concepts around the plants and the shrubs and the animals that visit our site. So every child in the school has that vocabulary and that knowledge, but not only, if it's in the knowledge organizer, all of the educators are going to become familiar with those species. And if they don't recognize a word, they're going to have to go and look it up and find out. And that way, that's another way into teaching all of the adults in the school about the different types of shrubs and animals that we have in our space. Because sometimes, you know, you're just that type, you're that person who knows about nature. But why should I have that natural intelligence? Because there are children in your class who are really drawn to that. And they want to be able to talk to somebody about it. They want to talk to somebody about the things that they found at the weekend that they want to know a little bit more about. That's why it needs to be in our curriculum, I think.
So that video will be embedded into the Beara newsletter, so you can watch that back. But I am going to wrap up now. So to summarise, composting is all about layering language, knowledge and experiences throughout the child's schooling, focusing on the collective, focusing on relationality, on inheritances, on legacies, and the forging of new links infused by older scraps. And if we are to take seriously Haraway's call to action and seek to resituate all of our lives within indivisible common worlds, our curriculum must make space and time to focus on the ways in which our past and present and future lives are entangled with those of other beings, those non-living and living entities and technologies, weathers, forces, landforms. And this starts from careful noticing, from slowing down, attending to, thinking with, and listening.
Thank you, Amy, very much. And again, you just have to imagine the crowds of people out there clapping to your lovely presentation. Apologies that we had a glitch there, I think, in terms of not being able to actually see the video, but it was great to hear that recording. I've got a sort of, it may be a slightly off-center question, but I was intrigued when you said early on in the presentation about this notion of intersectionality and the relationship between intersectionality and sustainability, and I just wondered if you could perhaps talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I mean, gosh, you could talk about that for quite a while. I think what we've really seen in the microcosm of our school is the great variety of backgrounds from which children are coming from, and how that informs their own understandings of their locality and the global question. I think that there is a strength that we as educators need to draw on and attend to the audiences which we're talking to, understanding that intersectionality, that great variety. And really starting with the children's own backgrounds and where they're coming from as a way to leap into bigger questions.
Thank you very much. I don't know if you can see, can you see your slides, and can you see that people are tapping in words? I'm just wondering if you can sort of pick up on what's coming through there. It would be lovely to hear what your thoughts are on that.
So my question was, what elements would you add to the environmental humanities compost pile? And I'm seeing a lovely link here to PSHE and to RE Wellbeing in terms of philosophy, communication, playtime, and nature and rewilding. This is all about growth. It's about staying with the I think staying with the children's own curiosities, and as I say, making space and time for that witness is a lovely one there. And individual projects. I think my point there at the end about about listening and storying has to begin from, as an educator's point of view, a concern to attend to those who are in front of them. Worms, these are fantastic. And I mean, of course, our own challenge was, where do we begin with that? Because, you know, we are an inner city school in Zone 1, but a lot can be done in a very, very small space. And we continue this through the classrooms. My children, when I was explaining to them today that I was speaking at the conference, they said, well, are you going to talk about the radishes? And you see how we've this tiny little plastic tray, we're growing seedlings at the minute. And that doesn't even take up a desk space. But for them, it's an absolute anchor into their being with each other, with myself, with the garden in the classroom.
Thank you very much, Amy. That's been amazing. Really, really wonderful presentation. Thank you. Great. We're going to move on to our next fabulous speaker. Rahul Karavajra is an engagement manager at LUTFA, the immersive and interactive EdTech platform that allows pupils to build connections with new people, places and cultures, and brings powerful human stories from across the globe into the classroom. In the wake of the Birmingham Trojan Horse affair, Rahul helped establish the Birmingham Education Partnership, a school-led system for school improvement. And he works with senior and executive leaders across the country to improve the quality of teaching and leadership and to close the disadvantage gap. Rahul, you have the floor.
Hi, Jerry. Thank you. Just waiting for my slide to move over. Hopefully that will happen soon. Hi, everyone. I hope you're well. My name is Rahul. I'm an engagement manager at LIFTA, a global learning organization that helps schools bring their sustainability and global learning curriculum to life through the power of human stories. And I'd like to start with the following quote by Kofi Annan. I'll let you read it for a few seconds. This is one of the most used quotes in sustainable development. I'm sure you've come across it before. But for me, the big question is, how do we make sustainable development resonate with pupils inside the classroom so that they're more inspired to be sustainability ambassadors in their local communities and beyond? At LIFTA, we bring global learning and sustainability to life by inviting students to experience different cultures and perspectives through our immersive and interactive platform. It gives them the opportunity to see informed connections with positive human stories from around the world, and can also support young people to engage with their responsibility as global citizens. We believe that pupils have the potential to build a more empathetic, peaceful and sustainable world. And as educators, it's our responsibility to inspire and empower them to elevate the societies of the future. And to aid teachers, we've been working with the British Council, the Department for International Development and UKAID to deliver a CPD course called Teaching the Sustainable Development Goals, Skills and Values with LIFTA as part of our Connecting Classrooms for Global Learning programme. The first thing we ask teachers on the course is how familiar they are with the SDGs. And it's normal for the vast majority of teachers to be unaware of them at best. The 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development was adopted by all UN member states back in 2015 and has provided a shared blueprint for peace and prosperity for people and planet. And the 17 SDGs are central to this. And they're also a great framework for schools to start introducing sustainability, global learning and diversity into their curriculum. What LIFTA is able to do is bring these SDGs to life for pupils. So, what is LIFTA? LIFTA is an educational platform that allows teachers to transport their pupils across the world to broaden their horizons and expand their cultural capital. They get to meet new people, places and communities through powerful human documentary films, which are linked to the SDGs, but also model the key skills and values that our young people need to become sustainably conscious global citizens. Pupils are introduced to these human stories in what we call story worlds. Story worlds are 360 immersive and interactive spaces that bring learning to life. It's where sustainability is given a human face. So why is this so important? Well, as a philosophy graduate, I'm going to lean on the words of someone much smarter than me. This is Emmanuel Levinas, who reminds us that ethics is first philosophy. And in Totality and Infinity, Levinas says that it's through the face of the other that moves us into an inordinate ethical responsibility. The face presents itself and demands justice. And in front of it, I demand more of myself. More simply put, when we come across the face of another person, we're forced to confront our responsibility for them. Their reality becomes my reality, a similar theme to Ubuntu. After all, we are each other's environment. By being introduced to real humans, pupils are able to develop a sense of empathy and are reminded of their responsibility for others. It's through our story worlds that pupils also come across important concepts around sustainability, as well as important philosophical questions about how to go about creating a better, more sustainable world. So let's go and explore. I'm going to take you into Lifter to show you what the pupils' experience would be. I'm going to start a short film now. And hopefully this works. There we go. So each of these pins is a place that a student can visit. And today we're going to go to Ara Amba. Ara Amba is a small community founded in the early 70s by a group of farmers and shepherds who had a vision for a fairer and more equal society. The community has developed a lot since it was founded. As we'll see in a moment, there are many hurdles along the way. But today we're going to take a closer look at the visitor center. The man in the green hat is Dr. Zumra, the founder of the village. The people you see around the room are visitors. They've traveled for 3 days by bus to see for themselves how Ara Amba pulled itself out of poverty. And the person we're going to meet today is Inanne, who's a tour guide in Ara Amba. And I'm going to click on the red icon above Inanne, and we'll all watch a short film about Ara Amba and its journey.
ግን እኛ ስንዴ ግን እየተሰፈረ እንድንቀመጥ አንፈልግም። መረዳዳት ባህላችን ነው። እኛ ማንሻገራቸው እንዲሉ ሌሎች ችግሩ ሲግዳ አጋጥሞን የነበረው ከደቡብ ተመልሰን እዚህ ስንመጣ መሬት የለንም። የአካባቢ ማህበረሰብ ከፋፍሎ ይዞታል። 87 88 89 እስከ 94 እና እስከ 95 ድረስ የዳቦ ምንነት አናውቅም ነበር እና የዛን ጊዜ እርዳታ ኮሚሽን የዞኑ እርዳታ ኮሚሽን እኒህ ሰዎች ምንድነው አይናቸው ሁሉ አረንጓዴ ሆነ ጥርሳቸው አረንጓዴ እንዲሁ ሆኖ ኢትዮጵያዊ አይደሉም እንዴ ዝም ብለን ማየት አለብን ባይሆን የተወሰነ ትንሽ ስንዴና ትንሽ ዘይት መስጠት አለብን አንድ ወደ 3 ወር ይመስለኛል ባልሳሳትም ጊዜ ላይ ጠኛ አይደለሁምና ሲመጣ ልጆቻችን ወደ ምን ሄዱ ነገ እንረዳለን የሚለው ነገር አምሯቸው ውስጥ አስገቡ ስንዴ መቼ ነው የሚመጣልን ዘይት መቼ ነው የሚመጣልን ማለት ጀመሩ የዛን ጊዜ ዙምራ አያችሁ በሽታው ወደ ልጆቻችን ሲተላለፍ ሀኛ አልፎ በሽታው ወደ ልጆቻችን ተላለፈ መቼ ነው ዘይት መቼ ነው ስንዴ ያለው ይሄ ሆነ ማለት ደግሞ ከሰር ሆዳችን እንበደረው እርዳታው ይቅርብና ያለው ዙምራ ይዛን እርዳታ ኮሚሽን ሁለት ሆነ ደደል ነው የተናገርነው እንዲቆም ማለት ነው ስንናገር እርዳታ ኮሚሽን ያለው ሰው እኔ እስካሁን ድረስ በዚህ ስራ ላይ 16 አመት ሰርቻለሁ ግን እንደ ያለ ማህበረሰብ አጋጥሞኝ ያውቅ ኋላ 94 ላይ ጥቃቅን ስልጣን የኛን በሚዲያ ሲያይ በአማራ ክልል ነው መጀመሪያ የተላለፈውና ሲያይ መጣዘ የተወሰነ ስልጣን ያለሰጣቸው እነዚህ ሰዎች ለራሳቸው ህይወታቸው ጥሩ ህይወት ይኖራሉ ምንድነው የፈጠረው ዙምራ እዚያው ላይ አንተ ያለ ማሽኑን ሳትወስድብኝ እኔ ጠርቤ መቅጠም አለብኝ ብሎ በማሽን ነው እንግዲህ ያ ተጠርቦ ምን ብሎ ተዘጋጅቶ የመጣው ዙምራ ግን ቀጥታ በመጥረቢያ ሰው ነው በራስ መተማመን አለው እንጂ ምንም ሞክሮት አይደለም ከዛ በፊት አናጺ ሆኖ ወይም ማኑሮት ወይም ተምሮ አይደለም አንድ ገበሬ ነው እስከ አመት ድረስ ግን በዛች ማፊን ሁለት እየሆነ የሰለጠነው ሰዎች ሟችና ቆየን በጎንም ደግሞ ትንሽ የምትሸጥ ነገር እያወጣን ቆየን ከዚያ በአመቱ 3 ማሽን ሰጠ። ዙምራ ጋር 4 6 እና 5 ስንት ናቸው? 11 ማለት ነው። ከዛ ደግሞ በእንጨቱ ሞድ ሆኖ ደግሞ ያሰራነው አለና በአጠቃላይ 17 ነው። አይ ሙከራ ነው እንጂ እነን ፈጣሪዎች ነን ማለት አይቻልም። ግን እየሞከርን ነው። እንደኛ እንዳውራን ባባባል ማለት ነው። ለምን በራስ መተማመን ከሰራው ወርቁ ከጀ ነው።
So now
Amazing. So I'd like to ask this question to you all. What sustainability themes, skills and values can be taught from Ara Amber and Inane's story? It'd be great to hear, or see, I should say, what your responses are. One of the things that I love about Inane's story is that it's a powerful woman from a part of the world that we often hear of a very different narrative. And I think that film shows an empowered community, often something that isn't shown on our TV screens, isn't something that pupils would often have exposure to. And that's a theme that runs across LIFTA as well. Great to see resilience, inclusion, innovation, community sustainability. Amazing. These are great. What I want to do is move on to show you the links to the Sustainable Development Goals that I have found throughout the film. And as you can see here, these are the 5 ones that are really clearly seen within the film. But there are also some key skills and values that crop up across the short film as well. Now, one way in which schools can get involved with building a curriculum for a sustainable future is to join LIFTA on our CPD course, Teach SDGs, Skills and Values. The course is fully funded for all state schools in England, Scotland and Wales, and teachers also get a 3-month free trial as part of the course. The course begins with a webinar that empowers teachers to use LIFTA and weave global learning and SDGs into their curriculum. They're then invited to a review session where colleagues can share how their schools have used LIFTA to bring sustainable development to life, sharing inspiration and ideas. To see upcoming webinar dates, please visit lifta.com/training. And I know the task at hand at the moment around sustainable development may seem monumental, and the challenge that our pupils face in the future are not going to be easy. But if we take inspiration from communities like Ara Amber, we can empower our pupils to come together and succeed. As Inanne said, if we work hard, the gold is in our hands. So thank you. Questions? I think Jerry's joining us. There we are.
Yeah, I'm just sorry. I feel like I'm juggling kittens at the moment. That was just extraordinary. And thank you very much for that film. A message to go out to Stephen Martin. Stephen, I can see your question. I just didn't quite understand the wording. So if you can type that question again, I'd like to ask that question to Rahul. But it was just too brief, and I couldn't quite get the sense of your question. But Fran Martin has asked a question. Her question is one of the challenges of the SDGs that sustainability and development are often opposing ideas?
Oh, that's an interesting question. And I think probably one for someone much smarter than me, unfortunately, for it to become to be sustainability. I think they go hand in hand. I think it's a question to be asked. I'm probably not the best person to answer that question. I'm sure others on the panel later on could probably address that a little clearer.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely fine. Stephen has come straight back with that question, and he says, our education systems prioritize the acquisition of knowledge. Whoops, I was just asking it, the question's just moved. So I'll read that again. Our education systems prioritize the acquisition of knowledge, not its application for social well-being. What transformative changes do we need to make to these systems more relevant to learning for sustainability?
I think one of the first things we need to do is arm teachers with the knowledge around sustainability. So by coming on to courses at Lifter or by engaging with some of the other organizations that we've heard from today, and the resources allows teachers to probably create a space within their classrooms that can lead to change. And I think we need to also kind of make it a priority, a core pillar of our curriculums moving forward, and something that today will hopefully kind of bring the focus of a little bit more. I don't know if I've hit the nail on the head on that question, but if you could repeat the question, that'd be helpful.
I can read, absolutely I can do.
Yeah,
So he says our education systems prioritize the acquisition of knowledge, not its application for social well-being. It's that sort of the age-old thing that we sort of test and not necessarily get to the heart of what we want, really. What transformative changes do we need to make to these systems more relevant to learning for sustainability? So real sort of authentic learning rather than
absolutely
superficial.
Absolutely. And again, by bringing a human face into the classroom allows it to be grounded, something that the previous conversation around composting was kind of relating to. But again, these questions are for way smarter people than me, unfortunately.
That's fine, thank you. So, a question from Samira El Budamusi. Gosh, I hope I've got that pronunciation right, Samira. Apologies if I haven't. Can educators help young generations overcome the intergenerational conflict where the, whoops, we just keep moving, the questions keep moving around when I'm reading them, where the blame is put on older generations for the damage made, and help them gain hope in the future? Would you like me to read that?
No, absolutely. I think educators do play a key role in that. I think it's interesting to understand how these issues have arisen from previous generations, but I think an educator's role is to create a space of hope and opportunity moving forward. I think if that's missing, it can become quite heavy, quite a burden. And a lot of the content we have on Lifter is around raising inspiration and hope. So no, definitely, I think it's an educator's role to definitely do something like that within the classroom.
Paul Vare comes in and says, awareness is great, but is there space in your program to critique the SDGs?
We welcome it. Please do come on or come and talk to us about the things you want to critique around the SDGs. We're more than willing to listen.
I might bring Jackie Eyre in a moment, because I remember Jackie picking up on that issue of SDGs in her talk. So Jackie, if we've got space, I might just bring you in on those points. Jen Bourne, I hope.
Just to go back to that actual question again, I think it's also important. Teachers and educators are quite busy people, and what the SDGs do is really not simplify, but they package sustainable development in a really clear and concise way that can be delivered within the classroom. So I think there is an element where we need to critique what we're putting in front of the classroom, but I do feel as if the SDGs are the best of what we've got for sustainable development moving forward.
Thank you for that. Jen Bourne says, like you, I run an organization that, as I understand it, complements the curriculum and provides a tool and resources for teachers. How can we actually influence those responsibly for writing the curriculum to embed sustainability?
I think, going back, it's about broadening their horizons by making them see that actually sustainable development can fit into all parts of the curriculum. It doesn't just have to be during assemblies or your tutor form times in secondaries. It can be weaved into all subject areas, PSHE, RE, all the way through to maths and science. From the questions you're asking, if you're teaching the nitrogen cycle, why not expose them to deforestation in the Amazon and put it within that context, or around maths and economics, with Ara Amber, and bridging questions out of that. I think it's all about making it relatable to what they're already doing.
Thank you, Rahul. Jackie, I wonder if you can come in, if we can bring Jackie in, because I think if I picked up on your presentation, you were semi-critical about that, the some of the terminology around SDGs. I wondered if you can pick up on that, or did I misinterpret that?
No, I don't. I think academically you can critique them, and they are very simplistic sometimes. But I would agree with Raoul that I think for schools, they're actually a very accessible way to start considering sustainability issues. I mean, different schools do it different ways. So, you know, some will hand out an SDG to a year group and get them doing an assembly, which maybe sees them a bit in isolation, but at least they're talking about them. Other schools will link them together, so you'll look maybe at the economic ones, the environmental ones, the social ones. I suppose the benefit is it's a starting point for teachers to have something to reflect on, and there are lots of resources out there, and you know, they're growing all the time.
Thank you, Jackie. Vicky Guy has sort of said, so like the critical analysis of the why and the how, rather than just accepting that this is so. Just if you can pick up on that, Raoul, at all.
I'm struggling to understand what it was actually about. Sorry, Vicky, if you want to repeat that, Jerry.
She's saying that, so like the critical analysis of the why and the how, rather than accepting. I think that's picking up on the point that Jackie has just made. Haydar Ali says, is it possible to develop global curriculum at least until grade 12?
Yeah. So do you want me to pick up on
please
that one?
Do. Yeah, please do.
Yeah, I mean, if you take certain countries, so for example, if you look at Ireland, they have something called Worldwise schools, and they have a lot of government funding and government backing. So it's on the curriculum in Ireland, which gives it a status, but it embeds global issues, sustainability, right the way through from age 5 up to sixth form. And if you take a subject, I don't know, for example, business studies or drama or English, they will have examples of activities to do in every single lesson going right the way through. And if you take maybe Key Stage 5 as well, I think you could involve sixth formers in actually critiquing them, but also delivering them to younger pupils. So I think that way you could engage with them using a bit of active citizenship and peer-to-peer sort of models of learning.
Thank you, both of you. That's terrific. Rahul, thank you very much for your lovely presentation. Again, as I said with everybody else, you just have to imagine that sort of huge round of applause for you. But thank you so much. We'll go to questions at the very end of this. We're moving on now to our final guest speaker. Eleanor Langthorne is a senior lecturer in teacher education at the University of Worcester. She has a background in teaching secondary geography and science, as well as leading the Eco School and Global Learning Programme. She now leads secondary geography and sustainability in the School of Education and sits on the Sustainability and Responsible Futures Committee. She's worked on a variety of sustainable development projects, including working with the Environmental Agency and the Met Office, and her current Green Impact project centres on collaborations for teacher education in climate crisis. Eleanor, all over to you now.
Thanks so much, Jerry. I'm sorry if I've just been clicking through the slides. This isn't the first one. There's one with some lovely answers from trainee questions. So I'm just trying to find the right starting slide. This is the one. It's a bit of a sleuthing starter for you in that these are the answers. So what do you think the questions were? Following a 2-hour introduction, a virtual introduction to sustainable development and the SDGs for 230 secondary PGCE trainees, I asked for 2 responses using the Joyous Padlet. I'm sure you're all familiar with that super app that we've been using during these times of virtual learning. Can you guess from this selection of responses, which are they reflect the amassed responses pretty well, what the questions might have been? And I will come back to these to share what the questions actually were. So then back to I'm so sorry that we're going in 2 different directions. I'll go back to that first slide. Oh, and the last lot of questions. I just wanted to say that I feel deeply privileged to be part of this essential and urgent conversation. So thank you, Jerry, and thank you, Bira, for convening this opportunity for us to share our reflections and our practices at this time of recognised, declared climate emergency. It was quite tricky to decide how best to use these precious 10 minutes with you. So I've decided on a mix of project sharing, encouragement, and signposting, things that I have perhaps found useful. Okay. There we go. I thought it might be useful. I'm sorry, I'll get to the right slide. I'm aware that we might be a really like-minded community here, like-minded souls, and it certainly appeared that way with that 87% result at the beginning for those who perhaps want more sustainability, that you are already deeply connected with our unfolding climate and ecological emergency and our intrinsic responsibility as educators within that. But I'm also aware that we're all coming at this with different levels of experience, perhaps different levels of grief, different levels of skills and knowledge. So I wanted to take a moment to connect us all, or reconnect us with the specifics of target 4.7. We've been reminded of the goals, we've been reminded of goal 4, but within goal 4, target 4.7 specifically asks us this: to ensure that the learners are acquiring knowledge and skills needed to promote sustainable development, including, among others, through education for sustainable development and sustainable lifestyles, human rights, gender equality, promotion of a culture of peace and non-violence, global citizenship, and appreciation of cultural diversity and of culture's contribution to sustainable development. I know you've probably heard it before, and I felt that I needed to remind us all of that before I asked you this question. Given what you've heard about 4.7 that you've been reminded of, how would you say that the United Nations SDGs, perhaps specifically 4.7, or perhaps more generically, education for sustainable development, is embedded in the education programs that you are part of? I really appreciate you taking the time to do this, just to give us a little picture. So about 50% are saying fully embedded, changing over time, 67, 57%. So a few tokenistically and a few not at all. It's just not part of the program yet. Let's think about growth mindset and go back to the work of Carol Dweck. So thank you so much for taking the time to do that. I'm going to move on to my next slide and take us back to those questions. Thank you. So time to reveal the questions. The question for the left-hand side, those responses on the left-hand side, was: what fears or concerns do you have about education for sustainable development in your role as the teacher? And this was all secondary PGCE trainees. And on the right of the screen, what education for sustainable development have you seen in your first placement? So it becomes apparent that our trainees feel unprepared. This is at the University of Worcester. That some feel very alone, that some worry that they won't be effective, they're unsure how to deliver lessons on this wicked problem, and that geographers in particular feel a burden within their school communities to take responsibility for teaching and learning on education for sustainable development. But it's not the geographer's burden. This is a burden for everybody. This is something we all need to be working on. I'm sorry, my next slide hasn't come along. So I wanted to share with you a bit of our project, something I'm trying to do with a very helpful Green Impact Project Assistant. So you might not have connected with SOS before. Jackie talked about them earlier. It's an arm of the NUS who are particularly focused on climate and ecological emergency and trying to move work forward in this direction. They've been delivering change and supporting volunteers to try and become sustainability innovators across campuses for over a decade. Because they recognise that the example that our academic institutions set to our students is fundamental in creating a sustainable future. So it started in 2006, and I'm really lucky to have now got a GIPA, a Green Impact Project Assistant. That's a picture of her there, Megan Asprey, and she is working with me to support this project and at times reverse mentor me in the development of a curriculum for education in climate emergency for training teachers. I'm sorry, it won't click forward again. Thank you. So now into the signposting little bit. Thank you, Dior, for clicking along for me. Moving into signposting as we share some of the resources that we have been using in this project. And this fantastic text from Professor Rebecca Willis at the University of Lancaster shares her experiences, her years of experience and research in the field of climate change politics. Willis reminds us that state-level responses to climate change are dependent on social and political conceptions. It's obvious, really, and that responses to climate change are inherently political. it does seem obvious now that I've read it, but I needed to see it in black and white, that actually the movement needs to be in both directions, grassroots and top down. She argues, Willis, that it is possible and essential that we find democratic solutions. And she invites a level of democratic involvement of citizens and voters in responses to decision making at our time of climate breakdown. Next slide, please. And so pleasingly to me, a democratic approach was used earlier last year in early 2020 with the UK Climate Assembly in their consideration of the national target to reduce greenhouse gas emissions to net zero by 2050. And it led to the development of 25 underpinning principles for the UK path to net zero. And they were further voted on to create a list of prioritised concepts. The Climate Assembly consisted of 108 members, and they were selected through a process of sortition or civic lottery, you might call it, to be representative of the UK population. And they included members like engineers, health workers, parents, grandparents, so all ages, all different backgrounds. And they voted the #1 principle to underpin the path to net zero as this: informing and educating everyone. The role of education is apparent. People understand that education is key. Next slide, please. Thanks, Dior. So here, in terms of this Green Impact Project, we are aiming to engage our local population, our partnership schools, people in our community by undertaking an education, all education stakeholders in a climate assembly, our own educators assembly, if you like. So using a democratic assembly process, including expert input from localized climate impacts. So here in the city of Worcester, we have had perhaps 3 months of flooding in the last year. Which has really affected the city centre and transport routes and schools, and on top of everything else that we've been dealing with in the last year. So some expert input followed by debate and discussion to determine the content of a new secondary teacher education enhancement activity, a 10-hour module, an optional, an opt-in being developed, which will be entitled Education in Climate Emergency. And my thoughts on the participating stakeholders, we're just in the planning stage, is that we would be inviting school leaders, in-service and pre-service teachers, governors, parents, and local environmental groups to engage. For me, this project is an opportunity to engage as many people as possible through a democratic approach, which can only help move the conversation and our responses, our adaptation, our work in mitigating the very worst effects of what lies ahead in a forward direction. So next slide, please. Thanks, Dior. Here's the basic timeline. We're in the planning stage at the moment. We have tied it to some of the United Nations observances. So our recruitment phase runs between Mother Earth Day and International Day for Biological Diversity. And we're hoping to deliver the Educator Assembly on World Environment Day. Next slide, please. I know I've only got a minute left. So now the encouragement bit. I'm going to encourage you to try to move your practice from subversion to prominence. Much of my sustainability practice as a secondary classroom educator was delivered subversively, often beyond the classroom, often outside of the curriculum. And conversations with my HEI colleagues have revealed similar experiences. And I'm just going to say, don't wait for the invitation to take ownership. Don't wait for the invitation to take leadership over your sustainability content. There is quite literally no time to waste. You can make a difference every day in the practice that you do, in the things that you signpost, in the ways that you role model living. The work is the way. Next slide, please. A couple of signposts then that might be useful. The Sustainable Development Goals learning objectives developed by UNESCO, downloadable free, which you can hang your work on, pin it to these objectives. The book by Professor Willis there in terms of connecting with the politics. Fight the Fire is a free downloadable book, which is available at theecologist.org for free as an EPUB or a PDF, connecting us with how we might think about green jobs in the next phase of the global climate jobs. And then also this from Advance HE, there's been a draft consultation that's taken place over the last few months about an update to the Advanced HE guidance on education for sustainable development. And the new one will be available just a little bit later this month or in early April. So keep your eyes open for that. And I'm going to close much like Richard, thank you, Dior, for my last slide, with the wonderful David Attenborough, who recently reminded us in his speech to the United Nations Security Council that unparalleled levels of global cooperation are required in order to face the challenge of climate emergency. A democratic approach to curriculum development in the form of this Educators' Assembly, a process that could be replicated in your own community with your own partnership schools or by schools with other schools that they work with, I think has the potential to engage a broad audience and perhaps plant some seeds for change. Our interconnected higher education system can play a huge part in this much needed global cooperation, whilst we continue the essential work at the local level in our own communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Eleanor. Big round of applause, imagine. Thank you so much. We've got 2 questions from you. Bethany Davis, 3 questions coming in as I can see them. Bethany Davis asks, I am researching the potential of mapping curriculum by bioregion. Whoops, it moves around. Areas of similar environmental characteristics rather than state borders in Australia. The idea being to shift the design lens from human constructions of regions to the environment itself. Do you think there is any merit in this?
I think it sounds fabulous. Bethany, that sounds wonderful. And I know that some of the thinking in XR at the moment, who up here in this region that is frequently flooded, you know, there's a raised awareness of the floods and how they're impacting our city and other parts of the West Midlands. There's a deep water XR project, and they are talking along very similar lines about mapping our action based around the river basin rather than around sort of borders and territories that have been devised for councils and counties and things like that. I think that sounds like a smashing idea.
Paul Vare asks, there's been concern expressed about politicising the classroom. It's moved around. Don't we need to politicise ourselves to bring about the changes we need? And if so, how?
I think it starts, I mean, certainly with teachers in their training year. It is very difficult that we're having these statements from the government that are telling us that we can't teach about certain things, that we can't teach about capitalism, that we can't teach about anything that links to, anti-capitalism. I think it has to be part of the, you know, the mixed portfolio that we're giving to our teachers. It's about values education. Education fundamentally is politics. The politics decides what we teach. The politics decides the amount of time we get to teach it, what we have to squeeze into a year. So I think it is essential, Paul, that we're making the connections with our trainees, that the education that they are delivering, the vast majority of them, perhaps not those in multi-academy trusts or academy schools that might have some more say over the curriculum that they're delivering, but they are fundamentally delivering a political curriculum.
You'll like this one. It's from Trevor Tebbs, who's saying, I am listening in Vermont, USA. It's an excellent presentation. Thank you. And I'd like to share it with colleagues. Will this be possible? That's a question to you.
Oh, Trevor, hello in Vermont. How fabulous. Thank you so much for connecting. As a geographer, that just, it gives me tingles. Super. I would love to share this with you. Absolutely. I'm not entirely sure of what the BERA plans are in terms of showing this, but I think if you're here, I think you have access to a recording.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Samira, I've got Samira saying at Stephen Martin, interdisciplinary is a must in ESD. That's a message. Stephen Martin asks, how do we as educators breach other disciplinary traditions, or should we seek to campaign to abandon the barriers of disciplinary silos and echo chambers?
Gosh, that's a big question. Personally, as somebody who has taught cross-curricularly PSHE and global citizenship, geography and science for a number of years, I've always been able to make those cross-curricular connections, and I do that in my training program with my trainees. I link up with many other curriculum areas to do the same, but I'm aware that it's just based on my experience of having taught across several subjects and the benefits that has wrought me. I think it's a smashing idea to do that. It would require, of course, massive systemic change, but I think we require massive systemic change right now.
Completely agree with that. And talking about any promotion on that front, if you're tweeting, can I just remind everybody to tweet like crazy. Hashtag BERA_sustainability with a capital S. I'll say that again. Hashtag BERA sustainability with a capital S. Thank you very much for those questions. Eleanor, thank you very much. I'd like, if possible, to ask all of our speakers to come back on visually. I think, Dior, you're in a position, fantastic. Poor old Richard had loads of questions coming into him, and they came in late. So I'm hoping that we can see those questions. I'm not quite sure yet. I've got lots of questions coming in. I think the questions I'm seeing now are questions for Richard. Dior, can you give me some indication if that's the case? I'm looking at the messages in the sidebar. Yes, they are. Brilliant. And we've got a question from Roxana. I think that was quite, Italy is the first country we've had that question. Do we need academic Stephen Martin, do we need academic deliberative democracy, academic deliberative juries to transform our education systems? And the question's just moved. Don't move around. I'll ask that question again. Do we need academic deliberative democracy, academic deliberative juries to transform our education systems towards a more sustainable learning future? That question is to you, Richard.
Oh my goodness, is it to me?
I think it is. I'm reliably told it is.
It wasn't to me. Academic deliberative democracy. That's a wonderful phrase, and I'm not sure if I really even understand where that is going. If any of the others want to chip in there, I'd be very happy to be helpful.
Oh, that's open to the floor, folks.
I think so. I think we do need academic deliberative democracy. I think we need to be having conversations at this level about what is being delivered in our education system, what part of what is the curriculum, what are the teacher standards, what are we asking our educators that are shaping our children's futures to do and deliver.
I'm going to take the questions that are coming in now and just throw them to the panel. So feel free, panel, to dive in. We got a question from Fiona Groves, the Wildlife Trusts again. And Fiona's asking, how do we access in? Oh, that's questions we've had that question, I think. Fran Martin, connection. If we can ditch Dior, if we can ditch any of the questions that we've asked, it would be great. Fran Martin, a minute ago. This is a new question. Connection to place and the development of place attachment is central to the development of identity. Many children live and go to school in urban areas. Is there a danger in creating a binary between natural environment, good, and urban environment, bad? Great question, Fran. Somebody from our, Amy, you're nodding there. Let's throw that over to you, please.
Yeah, I completely agree. There's a danger of romanticizing that which is seen to be green and untouched and natural. And I think that as I mentioned, what stories tell stories. We need to be deliberative and attentive as we look to see where these binaries are blurred within the urban, and that can only happen where careful attention is paid. But I think also that those binaries are perhaps an adult construction. I don't necessarily think that children bring those distinct understandings of their own accord.
Thank you, Rahul. I can see you nodding there. I don't know whether or not you want to sort of add something to that.
I just completely agree with what Amy was saying. I don't think there's much more I can add to that. I do think how she finished, I believe that last point quite passionately.
Thank you. Oh, yeah. Eleanor, dive in.
I just wanted to raise awareness of, or highlight for those of you that don't know, that there has been a move by the exam board OCR to develop a GCSE in natural history, a proposal from originally Mary Colwell, and they are exploring at the moment. I'm lucky enough to be part of the strategic advisory board, and they're exploring at the moment how we can overcome that boundary, that romanticizing, and identify the natural history that is happening in our own streets. So, Fran, I do think it's an issue. And it's something that's being thought about in terms of how we develop this curriculum for natural history going forwards.
Thank you, Eleanor. Verity Jones asks, great talk, thank you. Can you say anything more about age-appropriate sustainable education? What might that look like? And I'll throw that to open to anybody that fancies answering that.
Oh, Verity, good question. that's tricky, because I think we have to know our context. We have to know who's in our classroom. I think there's almost the requirement to have a conversation with the community that you are part of when you're having these conversations, without, you know, sort of defined guidance on what to do. Having done a bit of reading through the Climate Psychology Alliance, the CPA, who have some amazing resources online, it's a bit about, from their perspective, going on the journey with your pupils, answering honestly the questions that they have at their level of understanding. I'm not sure I can say much more than that, but I think it is a challenge for us to think about what's suitable, and at what point do we stop and say, no, we can't give you any more information about this now. If there are questions, I think the advice would be to answer them.
Thank you. A question for Richard. Anne Foles says, thank you, Richard. Great project and insights. How to move nature walks from a luxury activity when there's time and when the weather is nice to the course space alongside literacy and numeracy. And that's a question to you.
Yeah, that's definitely one I'm interested in. I've done a lot of work on a cross-curricular or a thematic approach in primary education, and I think we do a lot more of that in Northern Ireland than maybe is current in what I call the Michael Gove curriculum. Maybe I'm doing him a disservice there, but it's more to do with knowledge, etc. But I'm always telling my students to steal time from literacy to get the geography in, or the geography history in. And that project that I mentioned earlier on today had lots of creative work in literacy. The writing was done on the work that they have done outside. So you don't just justify your outdoor learning, your geography-based projects, your sustainability work purely on the grounds of itself. You say to your bosses, I'm going to be doing lots of literacy here. I'm going to be doing lots of cross-curricular art and design work, and who knows what other subjects can come in there, but certainly literacy. And I always say to my students, the best literacy is done through geography anyway, and you could apply that to other subjects in the humanities and so on. So steal literacy time with a good purpose would be my answer to that one.
Richard, thank you very, very much. I'm going to finish with a comment from Dave Cudworth. Dave says, nature is everywhere, including cities. We need a curriculum that reconnects people with the nature in their local, so that they become passionate to protect it and take care of it. I'm not sure there's anybody here today that would be disagreeing with that statement. Folks, I'd like to thank everybody, first and foremost in the audience. I've got a message saying non-live. I don't know what that means. I'm hoping people are still there. Dior, tell me that we've still got an audience there. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Jill. To our audience, thank you very much for all of those questions. I'm reliably informed that any questions that haven't got through that have been sent to us in that written form, we're going to somehow address them. I'm a technological Luddite, I'm afraid, so I'm not quite sure how we will do that, but Dior promises me that will be what we're doing. So a huge thanks to our audience. It goes without saying, a massive thanks to all of our speakers for the time and energy that you've put in for this. We've got a discussion with that group after the audience leaves us, and to discuss about how we can sort of disseminate the work. The British Curriculum Forum, as you know, does an amazing job in terms of funding school-based research. We've got our investigation grants. We've got the BERA blog, and I know that I'm in the process. I should say I've sort of got dual hats. I'm the chair of the BCF, but I'm also the lead editor of the BERA blog, and we're looking to put together special editions on this. But for those of you in the audience, I will be thrilled if you can put together one-off articles for the BERA blog, and we can see if we can ratchet up the attention that we can offer on this. Thank you to absolutely everybody for today. I was going to say go home safely, but we're all at home, most of us, so that's a redundant point. Keep safe. Let's hurry up and get your jabs. Those of you, or those of us that are likely to have some sort of holiday, enjoy the holiday, but do it in a safe way. And thank you very much indeed for participating in today's event. All the best. See you soon.